the new college football recruiting calendar has been approved. Dave and I discussed this, I want to say a month ago, maybe. And an issue was with the early signing period, the truth of the matter is the work-life balance of college coaches was getting completely out of whack. It was getting insane. Just so you know, I mean, just think about this. You're recruiting every day as a college coach when you're not coaching every day you can, and you're coaching all the time, practices, film study, whatever, then the games themselves. It was going to drive a lot of people out of the game. There have been some changes. Some actually seem like more work, but there's one key thing that I think was welcome that has been approved for that every college coach is grateful for. So I want to run down these changes real quick. One of the main ones is off-campus in-person contact has now been allowed after January the 1st, after the prospect's junior year. Used to be you couldn't have off-campus in-person contact with prospects until after July 1st of their junior year. Now that seems like more work, but as Dave has constantly pointed out, the recruiting calendar's just really moved up 6 months. Everything just moved up 6 months with the early signing period. So it really doesn't add more work when you think about it. You're still putting the same effort in. The crux of the recruiting calendar is April 15th to May 29th is a contact period, and the total number of recruiting days for a program staff has gone from 168 down to 140. Recruiting days in the fall reduced from 42 to 33. This is a huge deal. This is a big deal. That means coaches now only have 140 recruiting days, not 168. That is 4 weeks of just life added back for coaches who really can't have any when they're working. Trust me, that is beyond welcome. And in the fall, when you're having to prepare for games, run practices each week, do all the stuff you're having to do in season, recruiting days during that's the most stressful time. So reducing that from 42 to 33 is a huge deal. That's a huge benefit. Please let me know what you guys think about that. I think that bringing it down from 168 to 140 is a big deal. I think this is very helpful to Tennessee because I think Josh Heupel is one of those coaches who doesn't mind doing the work. He's a workaholic. Recruiting's not his favorite thing, though. I'm just going to be honest with you. He is a schemes guy, similar to Steve Spurrier in the 90s. He's not as lazy as Spurrier. No disrespect to Spurrier. I love Steve Spurrier, but the dude didn't love recruiting that much. He was just in Florida in a time when it was easy to get recruits from Florida, and you could just get a bunch of speed guys from your backyard to run that fun and gun offense. Josh Heupel will recruit, but his passion, his specialty is scheming and X's and O's. That's what he loves to do. And this is going to be very helpful to him. When you add in the fewer recruiting days with the NIL money, this is where the big deal comes into play. So with the 168 days in the past, the coaches that were the biggest workaholics recruiting and had the biggest connections were going to get the biggest advantages. With fewer recruiting days, NIL comes even more into play. And that is where Tennessee gets a huge advantage. Again, Tennessee has one of the 5 largest NIL initiatives. I think Tennessee has the most effective NIL initiative in the nation. I do. The other ones competing with them are Miami, Texas A&M, Texas. And I believe in all of those NIL initiatives. I'm not saying that they're not legit. Florida was technically a top 5 NIL initiative, and that was a Bernie Madoff initiative. They threw that together, and it was a giant fraud scheme, and we all figured that out. So I think Tennessee's is the most effective. NIL money is now going to reducing the recruiting calendar allows NIL to come in and fill a void that coaches used to fill even more. Because now there's days coaches won't even contact players. And I know the NCAA is very clear that NIL should not be used for recruiting purposes. There ain't no way to stop that. There ain't no way to stop that whatsoever. So I'm telling you guys right now, this is a big, big, big deal. And Mr. Jones says Heupel's offense recruits itself. And I agree with you on that. That's another help for Tennessee. Heupel's offense at this point, if you're a quarterback or a receiver, you don't really need Josh Heupel to sell too much to you. I think you've seen the evidence at this point, particularly actually if you're a receiver. Quarterback's a little bit different because you might need to see one succeed in the NFL. You're about, and you probably will pretty soon with Hendon Hooker, but you know that as a receiver, you know that it's not as much about your development. You just need to make sure you get drafted high enough. And Josh Heupel is about to make stars out of receivers all over the place. And Travis says money talks. Travis, you're right. Money talks, and this is a big deal, and money's about to talk for Tennessee. That is 28 more days where NIL outweighs coaching recruiting, because coach recruiting is still a thing, but now coaches have 28 days where they can't contact athletes, and NIL is going to weigh even more heavily because of that. It's not just the other that's not the only recruiting news of the weekend, though. Another recruiting story that came out is that there has been a change in the number of official visits allowed. Prospects used to have a maximum of 5 official visits allowed. That number is now unlimited. Guys, this is another huge boost for Tennessee football. Fact of the matter is, Tennessee is one of the best host schools on official visits in the country, by far. This isn't extra work for coaches, by the way, because prospects can come whenever they want. Coaches are just when a player comes for a visit, coaches are just adding that into work they are already doing, or incorporating that into work they're already doing, so it's not going to wreck their work-life balance. You up this from 5 to unlimited, again, NIL comes into play, because this means every time a player comes to campus, they can start negotiating more with companies that might like to give them a few endorsements here or there were they to go to that school. Again, the school with the NIL money is going to win. And this is another big advantage for that. And that's a big advantage for Tennessee. Because again, Tennessee's got the money. And as Travis alluded to earlier, money talks. And Mr. Jones brings up about how he stole Merklinger. Yes, he did. Right out of North Carolina's backyard, stole Merklinger, and that was a huge gift. And by the way, the truth of the matter is Merklinger is a better fit for other pro-style offenses and chose Heupel in Tennessee. And that's very, very intriguing. David Johns says, glad you're on today. Couldn't get anything but replays for a couple of days. Thought I'd been banned for my comment on Memphis. Forgot about that comment. You were not banned, David. Don't worry. We were off Tuesday and Wednesday, and then I decided to go solo Thursday and Friday. So that's all that's happened. And so welcome back. Glad we could do the show again. But yes, sticking with this recruiting news, let me know what you guys think. You guys think these changes are good? I think the unofficial visits really help Tennessee. Another thing that really helps Tennessee with the unofficial visits, throw NIL out. Let's just talk abstract for a second. Knoxville in the fall is probably the best college football atmosphere there is. And that's not just because of the fans and Neyland Stadium, although that's a huge part of it. Don't get me wrong, that's a huge part of it. The vibe for Knoxville gives off the most fall vibe of probably any college football city you can think of. The Smoky Mountains in the background, the orange everywhere. You just feel fall in Knoxville. And I think that really gives the players a vibe of wanting to play football there. And so the more visits they can take, the better. I mean, that is you're right, Mr. Jones. I said North Carolina's backyard. They stole him from Georgia's backyard. I apologize. Merklinger was from Georgia. He was looking at heavily at North Carolina. My bad. But yes, Knoxville is a huge fall town. That's a big deal. And yes, Mr. Jones, you're right. The Alabama win was of epic proportions for a fan environment. You're right. I mean, a 3:30 game in Knoxville outweighs a 3:30 game anywhere else. Now, night games, yeah, Death Valley and the Swamp are the best night game environments. Apologies in advance to all Tennessee fans or Alabama fans. The best night environments are Baton Rouge and Gainesville. They just are. Those are epic night environments. 3:30 environment, by far the best 3:30 environment is in Knoxville. And there's not really a close second. I'm going to be honest with you guys. When you see the sunset, when you see the sun kind of on that side in the fall, and you see the clouds and the Smoky Mountains and just the backdrop, and then Neyland Stadium and all the orange, it's combine that with the actual fan atmosphere that is with every SEC stadium. I don't really think any other school competes, honestly, for a 3:30 environment. And that Alabama game was a 3:30 environment, and it showed in a big way. So I think these recruiting changes are huge advantages for Tennessee football. Huge. It's also an advantage. For programs that have elite talent in their backyard, like LSU or Georgia. because with fewer contact days, proximity to home is going to matter even more. And Georgia and LSU and Ohio State are going to benefit from that. Those are the 3 easiest schools to win it in the country. I always say that. They're the 3 best jobs you could possibly have. Even in NIL age, proximity to home is still going to matter because there will be enough NIL money to keep those players at home at those schools. So LSU, Ohio State, and Georgia aren't going anywhere. LSU is the easiest job in America. I say Ohio State and Georgia are second and third, interchangeable. The reason I say LSU is Louisiana athletes are all underrated too. If LSU has a number 5 ranked recruiting class, it's number 1. Louisiana athletes are insanely amazing. They're always underrated. I think largely because LSU doesn't have as much of a recruiting site scene as other schools, so there's not as much politicking to up the rankings of those players. But yeah, I think LSU is the best job. And I think talent in the backyard is going to be a big deal. Travis says, I've been to most SEC towns, barring Nashville. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. I get that. I'm not one for, I'll be honest, I'm not one for living in college towns in general, but going to them on game day, I totally understand what you're talking about. And yeah, so it's, and if you talk about the best place to be during a game day atmosphere, Knoxville has the best game day atmosphere. If you were to talk the best college town in general as just a college town, and I mean not football season going on like throughout the year, I would actually say Athens is the best in the SEC. I do love Athens, but Sanford Stadium is not nearly the best atmosphere at all. I don't care what happened with Tennessee, Georgia last year. Sanford Stadium is a boring place. Mr. Jones says, just because we play mostly in the day because they can't wait to see us. The Bama game showed up on the Richter scale as an earthquake from the rumble of the stadium. Nice. Did not know that. That's intriguing. I know LSU registered one in the 80s. And I remember Lou Holtz complaining about the decibel level one time at Tennessee, which was hilarious. John Hill, I hate going to Columbia, South Carolina. Speaking of Lou Holtz, John, I'm with you. Columbia, South Carolina is arguably the worst SEC town there is, by far. Even worse of an atmosphere than Vanderbilt, because at least you're in Nashville with Vanderbilt. And so I got to be with you. I'm with you on that. Columbia is a horrible, miserable, boring place. The stadium is out in a field in the middle of nowhere. I remember going there one time, and all I could find was Bojangles. It's just, there's nothing. Columbia's awful. Columbia's terrible. Like, I don't know how you could see that atmosphere and ever want to go there. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. John also says, there are no good dog fans, none whatsoever, and I live in North Georgia. I mean, I take your word for it. I will say just that the town is a great college town. Travis, you're right about Gainesville. Gainesville's not a great college town either. I'm actually with you on that. But the atmosphere, you can't take away from the atmosphere of a night game in the swamp. And actually, I'm going to give Columbia, South Carolina some credit too. A night game in Columbia's got a pretty good atmosphere too. It's pretty loud. So this is what we're talking about here, guys. College towns versus the stadiums themselves, and combining the two, what's great about them. Knoxville's a great college town and has an amazing stadium. So I think that's one of the things that sells. Baton Rouge, again, it's got to be at night. Tennessee proved that noon games in Baton Rouge are dull and boring. And Mr. Jones says you can't spell suck without UK and SC. Mr. Jones is on a roll today. John Hill, but at least Gainesville is close to the beach. Columbia is usually hotter than Three Hells. Yeah, but okay, my experience isn't Gainesville hotter than Columbia. I mean, my experience was Gainesville's miserable. It's like, I remember the one I went to, it was 90 at night, it felt like. Now this is skewed. I went to Gainesville, and I've never gone to Gainesville not in September, and I've gone to Columbia only in the end of October and November. So maybe that's why it felt cooler in Columbia. So I would take your word for that. And Gainesville is close to the beach. What? That's true. I think Gainesville's closer to the beach than Columbia. So this is all going to be interesting. Knoxville's a great. Tennessee is going to benefit a lot from these recruiting changes. It's going to help with official visits. You want kids visiting Knoxville. It's a great place to visit. And also, NIL money is about to fill a larger void than what already existed.